afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. We have a very exciting session for you and a special live stream on the Friday morning here in the United States. So thank you so much for joining us. We are very excited to have you. A few logistics if you are new to our third stage live stream that I want to point out before we introduce our distinguished panel. We are streaming to YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and a variety of different platforms. If you go ahead and type in your chat wherever you are joining from, whichever platform, we can see all of your aggregated feedback and questions. These panels and different live streams are meant to be super interactive. We always like to hear from our audience or our client community. So go ahead and put your feedback, interact with each other in that chat box, and we will actually answer your questions live. So today, a little bit different of a live stream. We actually are releasing our 2023 Digital Transformation Report, which is our most popular guide. It is a very dense 57 pages of all things digital transformation. It covers top systems to best practices, to best of breed systems, to organizational change management, supply chain, everything about digital transformation. So today we are going to unpack that. If you would like to access and download this free report, it is in the description in wherever you're watching. You can also go to thirdstage-consulting.com and our guides and reports, and it is our featured report right on top of our website there. So very excited to kind of go through this today. For us, this is the first time we've had our full executive leadership on a panel. We bring years, decades of experience here in the digital transformation space. So this is a very exciting panel. So before I introduce them, we'd love to know where you're joining from today. So if you could go ahead and pop in the comments where you are joining from. We have our global representation today. So first, let's do some quick introductions, and I am going to start with the newest member of our team who is not new to the digital transformation space in general. He brings a wealth of experience, but newer to our third stage team. So Greg Benton is our Chief Strategy Officer, and he is joining us from our Denver, United States office today. So Greg, if you wouldn't mind, we'll do a quick round robin of introductions about your role here at Third Stage and just some brief experience you have in the digital transformation space.
Greg Benton, great to be with you today, this afternoon, this morning. And I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at Third Stage. As Kyler said, I've been involved in digital transformation, ERP implementation, remediation, a lot of work over the last 25 years, and I'm responsible for the overall strategy, the solution development here at Third Stage, and very happy to be with you with the release of our report this morning.
Excellent. Thanks, Greg. And then we will go in order. So Clifford Martin represents our EMEA team. So Clifford, if you wouldn't mind doing a quick intro, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Carla, and great to be here. It's a fantastic, very comprehensive, insightful report. So looking forward to unpacking it with the team, and of course with the some of the attendees. Clifford Martin, Managing Director for Third Stage, based in Cape Town, on the EMEA side of the world. And I've been involved in digital transformation over many decades, as I think is evident from the grey hair, and in a number of different roles, which I think is always interesting. So both as leading and managing large, complex transformation projects, as well as consulting for organizations like Gartner, KPMG, EY. And then the last 2 years or so, very much enjoying the position here at Third Stage and working with our African Middle East clients. Thank you, Carla.
Excellent. Thanks, Clifford. And then we will go to, and I'd like to point out, Wayne, that most of our users here are from Australia so far. So they're getting the gold star because they really got the short end of the stick on the time zone. So thank you to all of our Aussies out there. And Wayne, I'll pass it to you for an introduction to our APAC region.
Yeah, hi, I'm Wayne Holtham. I'm the Vice President for Third Stage Consulting in the APAC region, so Australia and the rest of Asia. Yeah, like Clifford, I've been around in digital transformations for a number of years, whether it be delivering, whether it be training, coaching, whether it be process development. I've had a fairly good I suppose, experience with all of those sort of areas. I noticed Sonny's from Melbourne as well, so he's enjoying the late night. So thank you, Sonny, for tuning in.
Yes, thank you for joining us on this this beautiful Australia evening, even though I hear you're freezing down there. So, and then last but certainly not least, and doesn't really need an introduction, we have Eric Kimberling. So I'll pass it to Eric. I don't know, Eric, the last time you actually introduced yourself on one of these. So we'll let you do that real quick.
I know. Now I don't know what to say for my intro. No, my name's Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage, and I've been doing digital transformation stuff now for about 25 years. Started off as a change management consultant early in my career, and over the years expanded into software selection, implementation, project management, process improvement, more change management, that sort of thing. So, and most of that experience base has been across different platforms in a technology agnostic way. So it's a bit about my background.
Excellent. Well, let's get into it. Again, our 2023 Digital Transformation Report is released live on our website, in the description here and wherever you're watching. But I want to get into kind of a baseline of unpacking. So what I'm hoping to do first is define digital transformation. And then there's a lot of talk around our industry of what is digital transformation? Is it a buzzword, or is it an actual important business tactic? So our first assignment for our panelists is to define digital transformation in 4 words or less. So I feel like who's going to be best at this is Clifford. So Clifford, I'm going to go to you first. And put you on the spot there. So digital transformation, 4 words or less.
Well, 4 words or less, it depends. We may have a difference of opinion on spelling over here. It might be 5 words from you where you come from, 4 words from where I come from. Let's see. Okay. So I would define it as technology-enabled business role redesign. Is that 4 or 5 words, Carla? We can debate that one later on.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I think fundamentally important, it is a redesign of the business model, and it has to be. And if we go back to the very simplistic and quite catchy digital transformation phrase, I really do believe it's more about the transformation and what does that really mean. And too often, I think we fall into the trap of doing optimization. So we drive out efficiencies in terms of our standard business processes, and you can do that with legacy ERP. That's not particularly different or new, or doesn't give you any specific great advantage. So I do think it is about using technology, and it's about utilizing technology to change the business model. And what I mean by the business model, to essentially change how we create value and how the different products and services we create, how we engage with our customers, and how we define that type of value. So one has to, I think, if it's going to fit the classification of digital transformation, I do believe you have to be fundamentally changing your business model. Your products and services you deliver, the channels you engage with customers, and how you define such value for the organization. Fundamentally important.
Yeah, very, very good. And Eric, you talk a lot about business transformation. Clifford talked about kind of the digital side and the technology. Is digital transformation truly a business transformation, or can you build on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're doing it right, I think it is. And, every company has different needs and priorities. And certainly every organization has the technological debt that they're trying to satisfy or address as part of their upgrades of technology and modernization of technology. But to do that alone, just in the context of only focusing on technology and not focusing on how are we going to materially improve our business, improve the business model, demonstrate a solid ROI. That's the part that's often missing. So I think that's the business piece that really has to sort of lead the charge when it comes to a transformation.
And Wayne, how do you establish that ROI or that business value around a digital transformation, kind of more of those solid metrics of measurement?
It's interesting because I think, as Clifford mentioned, the key thing is to be able to get a business model, operating principles that actually determine where's the value in your business. And then as you actually start to map that out, you start to see what the benefits will be by making those changes and adopting those new practices. And that's where the value and efficiency comes back out for the organization. That's where we call benefits realization, I guess. It's that ability to be able to realize those after we've planned and we've defined and then we've made the change, and then we can see what we're achieving.
Yeah, really well said. That benefits realization really starts with a strong strategy. And Greg, you've taught us a lot about what phase 0 means in a digital transformation. Can you talk to our audience about how important that is to set for success?
Yeah, when you're looking at preparing an organization for digital transformation, you have to really look at both all of the 3 pillars: people, process, and technology. It's not just a technology decision about the direction you're going. If I were to define digital transformation in 3 words, it would be unified enterprise operations. So you have to make sure that your organization, from the executive level all the way through everyone that works in the organization, is on board with the same go forward strategy, and that you have the organization prepared from a data standpoint, data cleansing, preparation for the new technology. And then you have to make a decision about what are your objectives for the end goals or the end state of your transformed operations, and get there by following a very concise plan and delivery. And then measure that all the way along through the implementation process, and certainly at the end of your transformation journey.
Absolutely. We could probably spend hours on all of the things that you just said when it comes to moving through a successful project. First, I want to talk a little bit about some industry trends, because that's a big piece of the 2023 report, is talking about what are we looking like as far as technology implementation, digital transformation, software implementation, all of those different pieces. What will that look like kind of in the enterprise area in 2020-30? So I think that's an interesting take, because everyone has different opinions on that. So I'm going to start with Wayne on this one. When it comes to, what do you think is going to be the number one trend when it comes to digital transformation in 2020, in the 2020s moving into 2030?
I think there's going to be a shift away from just going and shopping and buying a brand, a software brand as such. I think people are starting to see that, there's a bit more to transformation than just installing another brand sort of thing, or creating an update. It's more than that. And I think that's where people are going to start to take a step back and have a look at what they really want, or what they need to do and change in their business. Because at the moment, probably, if you look at some businesses, they are probably in a space that is really difficult. You look at business climates across the world, quite difficult. Everything's a challenge. And so, the idea of putting technology in to solve that is a good idea, but at the end of the day, we know it doesn't solve it. And I think that people are starting to wise up on that and starting to go, let's look a bit deeper. Let's see what we really need to be able to do. And that seems to be a trend that we're seeing in our area.
Absolutely. And Eric, what about those emerging technologies? How are businesses going to prepare to have things like AI, predictive analytics, those types of different pieces kind of within their strategies for technology implementation?
There's always the aspiration to do AI and machine learning, but the one thing that many people forget is the fact that you need consistency. And if we look at most businesses that we work in, we find that they are the least consistent in the way they operate, and that's usually evolved over many years. And so to try and put in AI or leverage machine learning, those sorts of things, it's about going back to getting a consistent process.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think we lost Wayne in the Aussie cloud because it's so late there. He's frozen. But so let's hear from kind of the rest of our panelists. We'll start with you, Eric, when it comes to those different types of technologies, or what you've been seeing in this space when it comes to industry trends.
So I guess I have sort of a split opinion on this. I mean, on one hand, you have sort of your basic automation technologies like GL and accounting and inventory management and sort of your base technology that you need to run your business. And companies struggle so much even just with that base technology that, you know, to now take on AI, machine learning, and look at some of these more emerging technologies, that's even more difficult for organizations to tackle. But at the same time, those newer technologies are the things that are providing capabilities that are truly groundbreaking and, you know, provide that ability to optimize benefits realization, like Wayne said, and to improve the business model, like Clifford and Greg said. So, you know, that's sort of what companies have to do is yes, there's great technologies out there, and technology is changing a lot faster than most organizations are capable of changing. So you really have to sort of find the right pace for your organization on how quickly you adopt some of these new technologies, and make sure that you at least get that base foundational stuff figured out first, so that you can really take full advantage of some of these more emerging technologies.
Yeah.
Well said.
And if I can, Colin, I think what's also interesting to add to that, you know, so clearly there's some technologies that are taking shape and getting a higher rate of adoption at a quicker pace than others. You know, cloud, of course, is certainly one. But I think what's also interesting is some of the associated trends. You know, so who's deploying these technologies within the organization, and what is the kind of base to which they're being deployed? And increasingly, these types of technology are deployed within the broader ecosystem and not just within the organization. So there's a lot of collaboration with other value creators or supply chains or whatever, customers, whatever. So it's increasingly being deployed in the broader ecosystem, I think, is important. And I think another very interesting trend is that it's, to a much less extent, is it being deployed by the formal hierarchical IT department within the organization. We're seeing a lot more shadow IT, so-called shadow IT, lots of technologies being deployed by whether it's retail, marketing. And that to me is also a very interesting trend, because to some extent, one sees the IT department losing control over these so-called new digital emerging technologies, and that slack being picked up by other capabilities within the organization. So I think the technology trend is interesting, but how they're being deployed, who's deploying them, and to where they're being deployed is quite an interesting trend as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm looking forward to kind of unpacking that kind of internal competencies. I'm going to turn back to the audience just real quick so we can talk about our global saturation here. We have Australia, we have Sam Graham from Spain, we have the United States here, our representation from Colorado. So a true global audience. I'm going to put up a comment question from Chris Simmons on LinkedIn. And Greg, I feel like this one is written for you. So I'm going to ask you to kind of go ahead and read it. He said, sometimes companies do not know what their current systems can produce. Sometimes it doesn't mean the purchase of a new technology. So as someone that manages our front lines from a client perspective, I'd really love your feedback on this thought/question, Greg.
You know, this is a very insightful comment. The fact that you're looking at a digital transformation for the organization doesn't necessarily mean that you take everything that you've had that has been working well and eliminate it or replace it. It means taking those custom applications, those systems that really make your business, and integrate those with the new technologies. So you may find that this is a hybrid solution. And one of the things that has really emerged over the last decade is the integration technologies. So the platforms being cloud-based actually allow for a lot more integration with legacy systems, with other ancillary applications and solutions that really help you in terms of your overall operational standards and go forward. So again, getting back to that preparation of the organization, the strategy, and the phase zero, understanding exactly what you need to keep, what you need to preserve and go forward with as a new system is the overall phase zero approach. Mm-hmm. So I think that I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And we really need to build out more of that phase zero understanding, because it is truly the most fundamental piece to set you up for success. So moving into kind of talking through these trends, we've seen a lot of conversation in the marketplace regarding best of breed systems, so a specialized system, a supply chain management, warehouse management, versus a full ERP system. So I want to do, again, a round robin style to say, is it going to be best of breed or a full ERP suite moving into 2023? So Wayne, let's start with you.
I think that it's going to be a best of breed. It seems to be one of those areas that people are looking for, because there are failings in trying to put a single ERP platform in. I probably don't tend to agree with that fully, but I see a lot of companies are wanting to go that way, where they actually want to get something that's specialized and suits their needs and really is focused. The challenge you have is trying to bring the two together and get them to work effectively. And that's I think that's the bit, as people actually embark on that journey. That's the challenge they'll face, is trying to get two different systems actually working seamlessly together. So it's I think it's a bit of a mix, but I think people are heading towards best of breed.
Good job, Wayne, not saying it depends, because I was about to start, some sort of drinking game, whether you're working on hydration, coffee, or you're enjoying a beverage in the Aussie area late at night. But good one. So let's go to our hashtag It Depends King. Eric, what are we going to see in the marketplace and best of breed versus full ERP?
Well, now you preempted my answer. I can't say that now. I can't say what I was really going to say.
You know me. I like to mix it up.
Well, I see this whole, unified single ERP versus best of breed debate. I see that a lot like politics. It's like, I think a lot of us, we all have opinions on that. Some of us have really strong opinions, but it's sort of like, it's never going to get, I don't think it'll ever get settled. It's the pendulum might swing a little bit back and forth, across the spectrum. But I think what you see in the marketplace, which is actually a pretty healthy thing, is you have sort of the unified single ERP vendors that are trying to be, for lack of a better word, they're trying to be everything to everyone. They're trying to provide capabilities that integrate cross industries and cross functional workflows and things like that. And there's a lot of value in that. And there's a lot of companies that do want that. But given the fact that ERP systems can't be everything to everyone, and there's always going to be vulnerabilities and weaknesses within that model, you're going to get upstart vendors that are going to come attack those vulnerabilities and provide something better, in certain pieces of a unified ERP. So you look at companies like Salesforce on the CRM side, or Workday on the human capital management side. That's exactly how those companies became so prominent, is because they went after the vulnerabilities of ERP systems. Salesforce said, we can provide a better CRM system, and Workday said, we can provide a better human capital management solution than most big ERP vendors. And so you see this tension and constant swinging of the pendulum in the market, where for all the advances that ERP makes, there's always going to be vulnerabilities and weaknesses within that model. You're going to have other software vendors that come in and try and attack that and provide a better mousetrap. And so I think what it does, excuse me, is it provides a lot of options for organizations. So the good news is you have a lot of options. You don't have to, pick just one size fits all model. You could have a hybrid. You could pick single ERP. You could go with best of breed. A lot of it just depends on. Oh, sorry, I just accidentally said it. I was trying really hard not to say it depends, but a lot of it depends on.
I just.
It was so hard for me to not say it depends in that entire response. But anyway, so it does depend, though. It depends on what your strategy is and what you're trying to accomplish. But the good news is I think there's always going to be lots of options. And I think that pendulum is going to always swing back and forth between the preferred model for organizations.
Absolutely. And we say it depends a lot here at Third Stage because of that business advocacy. That's what we come into the room to do, because we are so focused on making our client community successful. So ITs are specifically our executives, because I have that audience to do so when it comes to saying depends. But it truly is kind of our model here. So building on that, I'm going to go to you, Clifford, and I'm bring up a from Sam Graham, who I've said multiple times. I feel like you and Sam would be really good friends. Sam is a main audience contributor and a guest blogger for us, and I'm kind of going to evolve this to the conversation topic. So making companies more efficient doesn't necessarily making them more effective. So in this best of breed ERP argument, when we talk about what Eric just mentioned, the Workdays, the Salesforce of the world, that might make you more efficient in that specific area of the business. But does that make you more effective in building ROI and business value when it comes to the overall enterprise?
Yes, it touches on a number of points, Carla. And let me first say that I think the interesting thing when one looks at organizations that are primarily best of breed versus single or monolithic type ERP, I find it fascinating that they have often not arrived there through an informed ERP or digital transformation strategy. You know, it kind of happened a little bit by default very often, and that's quite interesting. And in many instances, it talks to the type of decision-making and governance model that one has, specifically in broader or complex organizations. So I certainly think there's a little bit more science needed, a little bit. One has to start with that digital transformation strategy and ensure that you understand why you're embarking on a particular route, whether that might be best of which will suit certain organizations, or suit certain subsidiaries within an organization, or certain parts of an organization, that, the more customer facing versus the more back office commodity type business processes. But it's often not as a result of an informed strategy. So I think there's a great opportunity to assist organizations in making those types of decisions. In terms of the efficiency, effectiveness thing, absolutely comes back to the business benefit realization debate that we started the session with. And I do find that it's a little bit sad, but more often than not, where the organizations become more efficient and more effective, it's often by default rather than by design. We start off with these grand ideas in the business case, very comprehensive, wanting to drive out certain qualitative benefits, both efficiency and effectiveness. And often organizations are just lucky to go live and just satisfied that they've actually taken this project live. And then they kind of rest on their laurels and declare victory. And we never really get to unpack those benefits, whether it's efficiency or effectiveness type benefits. So I think lots of scope to assist organizations actually achieve either of those benefits.
Absolutely. Definitely well said on the benefits realization. Greg, I'm going to do a question for you, again, more of a comment here. So Sunny from our ASSI area says ERP is a dinosaur. Changing your ERP is not necessarily digitizing your transformation journey. My view is API and the power of API is what brings the transformation. You kind of talked about the integration piece and that technology coming and emerging in the marketplace. So what's your thoughts on Sunny's comment?
Sunny, I think we're kindred spirits here. I believe that ERP has been enterprise resource planning, right? ERP is evolved into really enterprise operations, and enterprise operations have to be fully integrated. It's not the efficiency or the gains that you're going to get from a new system. It really is having the data sources from your entire enterprise being able to work together so that you can make decisions about how the business needs to move forward, so that you can take advantage of some of the the process automation that you create with your enterprise operations. And enterprise operations and ERP are surrounded by ancillary applications and systems. And of course, those need to be connected by APIs, by cloud-to-cloud connection, by the entire interoperability platform that you create as you go forward with the digital transformation. And I think that's why the end goal has to be all of your systems working together in an efficient manner to move the organization forward and reap the rewards of that expected return on investment. Otherwise, why are people going to invest in this type of transition and transformation?
Absolutely. So well said. And that brings me kind of to my next topic of why do digital transformations fail? And we know that this can be some of the most expensive failures. It can put small to mid-sized businesses in bankruptcy. It has a huge impact if you are not successful in implementing the technology you purchased, and then the user adoption phase, right? That additional phase on the end to make sure you're maximizing business value. So I'm going to do another lightning round with our panel here in 3 words or less, which we'll make a soft boundary there, right? Why do digital transformations fail? What is that number one reason? So let's start with you, Eric.
I would say internal misalignment would be a top reason why. So the organization isn't aligned on what it is they're trying to accomplish with the transformation. It doesn't align with their overall corporate goals and objectives. The team isn't heading in the same direction. There isn't clarity on what it is we expect from this project. Too often it's sort of a project that just gets delegated or relegated to lower levels of the organization to go solve a modernization of technology sort of problem. And the focus ends up being on just replacing technology without a clear vision of what it is we really want to get out of that. So I think that lack of clarity and alignment is really the root cause for a lot of other problems that stem from that. So you could point to 20 other problems that happen during a project. A lot of it traces back to that fact that you're not aligned as a team.
Misalignment. All right, Wayne, you got to pick something else. What's your choice when it comes to main failure point?
But mine is failure to recognize you need to change. It's probably more than 3 words, but many organizations think that a great strategy and technology is the perfect mix and forget that people have to actually use the system, and change is a key component of that. And so that's I think is one of the big areas that causes failures.
Excellent. So we have misalignment, we have change. Greg, what are your thoughts?
Lack of preparedness as an organization. It's getting back to the whole phase 0 idea. It's getting back to the understanding your strategy before you ever get into, selecting the technology piece, making sure that your people are all in sync with moving forward together, that you have executive alignment in terms of what you're going to do. Importantly, you have a budget that you understand what you want to achieve as your end goal. And I think that's, where people don't start as a digital transformation strategy. They start as a technology change. So.
Absolutely. Clifford, last but certainly not least, what are your thoughts on why transformations fail?
I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to say the same thing as Eric, but I'm going to say it differently. I think failure to define success. And I think it's important because, and it's not just about failure to define success and obviously align with the different stakeholder groups within the organization as to what constitutes success. But what I find interesting as well, Kyla, and to the panel, is the timing of measuring the success. The worst time to do it is when it's in the first 2-3 months post-deployment or post-go-live of this massive organizational transformation project. Absolutely, with the best will in the world and the best change management strategy, approach, and capabilities, the organization is going to go through some disruption. People have new roles, new technologies, new ways of working. And many organizations, for some other odd reason, decide that's the best time to decide whether we've been successful or not. One has to go through that little bit of a trough and then stabilize the new environment, new business-enabled or technology-enabled environment, and then start to optimize it and measure the benefits. But you have to first go through that stabilization phase. So I think aligning on business benefits and then deciding at what point in this life cycle do we actually decide to now take a rain check on whether we've achieved those benefits or not. It cannot be within a week after we've deployed this massive new technologies in the organization.
That's really well said, Clifford. And our 2023 report that we're talking about today has our main metrics that you do measure success, or how to set up your KPIs to understand if your project is successful. So let's talk about that a little bit. So Eric, what are some main KPIs or metrics that you should be measuring, and when should you be taking that measurement, to Clifford's point, to quantify the success of your digital transformation?
Sure. So there's certainly your sort of baseline metrics that most organizations are focused on, which is, to implement on time, on budget, that sort of thing. And that's where, a lot of organizations focus on those metrics. But what I'd say to that, though, is too often they focus on those metrics without fully understanding what the long-term implications are. So in other words, they focus on optimizing the time and cost to deploy technology, but they don't think about what the real time and cost and the impact of the overall deployment is. So in other words, you can minimize your implementation costs, but create more operational problems that cost you a lot more than the money you saved on, cutting your cost on the implementation. So it's a little bit misleading or misguided in terms of how organizations focus on it, but most organizations do focus on time and cost. But even more important, back to what Clifford and the others have mentioned, is that you really have to define the business value you want to get out of this. So what, for example, if you're deploying technology that could potentially help you increase revenue, let's define how are we going to change our business model and our processes and the way we're organized, and how are we going to use this new technology to increase revenue, and what is that revenue metric we want to hit, and how are we going to do that? Who's going to be accountable for it? How are we going to get the visibility into that? How are we going to need to change processes and people's jobs to use this technology in a better way to increase revenue? So it's not just setting the metric, it's also defining how we're going to get there. Too often organizations will do more of an academic exercise early in the project. They'll say, well, if we put in new technology, we can increase revenue by 10%, let's say, per year. And they put that in the business case. It helps justify the decision. The board approves the project, and no one ever looks at that metric again. And what you really need to do is say, okay, if we want to increase revenue 10%, let's put together a benefits realization plan of how we're going to do that. And it's going to be a lot more than just putting new technology in place. We're going to have to figure out how we change our processes in the organization. So, rather than give you specific metrics that organizations should look at, what I could say is organizations need to define those metrics that are most important to them. Why are you doing this project? What is it you want to get out of it? And how are you going to measure that going forward? And a lot of times it's revenue based. A lot of time it's reduction of cost. So, reducing inventory or reducing cycle times, that sort of thing, better visibility into planning. And that, there's a lot of different metrics like that may be more or less relevant depending on what your goals and objectives are as an organization.
Absolutely. Certainly well said. That needs to be unique to the organization. And I'm going to bring up this comment here and go to Greg, because we're talking about that phase 0 concept again. So digital transformations fail because the phase 0 is either not completed or does not achieve alignment and vision. So I'm going to evolve this to match kind of our conversation. Greg, in that phase 0, how do you set those KPIs? How do you look at the measurement for success or that benefits realization plan, as Eric just mentioned? What does that look like in that phase 0 approach?
This comment really goes back to everything that we've been talking about in terms of preparation for the organization. And really, there are two things that are linked to the return on investment and when and where that's measured. And one of those is the total cost of ownership. So as you're going into kind of the planning phase, you're going into the pre-plan, let's call it that, in phase 0. You really need to look at what the organization is going to achieve from bottom line cost savings, as Eric pointed out, or increased revenue, or the metrics that you're going to get as you come through the digital transformation journey. And that can be quantified as a business model, a total cost of ownership over the next 1 year to 5 to 10 years in terms of your overall journey. And then that can be equated to benchmark achievement of those metrics all the way along. And so the TCO actually generates the ROI at the end of the digital transformation that you've decided on. And that requires a very comprehensive phase 0 and approach to preparedness of the organization to move forward.
Absolutely. I think that's very well said. And again, some great insight in that 2023 report. It is, if you're just joining us, it is in the description. for each one of our live streams today, and also at thirdstage-consulting.com in our thought leadership guides and reports. So definitely be sure to check that out, because what Greg's saying here and that ROI of digital transformation, all of that really dense content and valuable content is involved in there. So I want to talk a little bit about what you touched on, Greg, and talk about specifically cloud. Cloud is a huge trend. A lot of what we're seeing in the digital transformation space is migrating to a cloud. We talked to Eric, you talked to Lisa Pope earlier this week, the president of Epicor, and what that looks like as far as cloud migration from a vendor standpoint. So I want to talk about unpopular opinions, because that's my favorite thing to do. So I'm going to go to you first, Clifford. Is cloud less expensive or more expensive for different organizations?
Are we still subject to the rule that we're not allowed to say it depends?
Well, Eric's fans are roasting me on the internet, so I'm not
going to get away with that already. So
I'm not canceled, but you can say it depends. I'll allow it. Okay.
No, that's fine, Carla. So it does often come down to how one defines expensive, because some organizations purely put all their technology deployment and decision making within a capital type of budget. Some are happy to go for more OPEX or subscription based, which of course cloud SaaS type solutions lend themselves to. And that's often sometimes easier to get approved, because it doesn't require the same level of authority or the same depth of business case or justification. So once again, I don't think it's always based off an informed decision as to how organizations end up, with either on-premise or something in the cloud, or a particular multi or single tenant SaaS type model. Certainly we know that the vendors are pushing cloud. And I do think that it comes down to what do you as an organization want, and what trade-offs are you willing to make from a cost perspective. So if we do want a high degree of flexibility, we have concerns about data security, as many organizations do, and we prefer our software and our data to be sitting on a server in our basement. It kind of feels more comforting, and we have more control over it. Even if that's a little bit more expensive, as it often is these days, I do find that organizations will tend to gravitate towards that type of decision, even though it may be a little bit more expensive. So I think a lot of these decisions are being made for other reasons, often sometimes emotional reasons, and just an inability to change, rather than based on purely, the TCO business case, if you want. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah. And so, Eric, what's your reaction to that in thinking through the decision making around choosing a cloud solution, choosing a hybrid solution, and unpacking or decoding a vendor pushing you into that new system? Is that for your benefit or theirs? How do you tell?
Well, it's definitely for their benefit. So, I mean, you have to recognize that, that they will benefit from you moving to the cloud. And the dynamic in the industry that drives a lot of this cloud adoption is not only because there are clear advantages and benefits to moving to the cloud, but arguably more importantly, because the vendors make higher margins and more steady, predictable revenue from cloud solutions than they do on premise. And that's what investors want, and that's what investors are rewarding the software vendors for. So there's a clear bias in the industry toward moving to the cloud, and that percolates or kind of cascades throughout the industry, and that the vendors then start commissioning Gartner and Forrester and industry analysts to put out all these reports about how great the cloud is and how everyone should move to the cloud. And so it becomes kind of like common perception that cloud is better. And it could be. I mean, there are definite advantages, but there's a cost to the cloud too. It's a cost that never goes away. Typically, it's a higher annual cost that you're paying to the vendors. Excuse me, I have very bad allergies today, so I apologize for the constant coughing here. But so that bias in the industry has really driven a lot of the sort of the blinders of what's the real downside in the dark side of the cloud, and a lot of organizations don't recognize that. For a lot of organizations, I would say it's actually going to cost you more to move to the cloud. Or at best case scenario, you're just shifting costs from internal costs that you're not maintaining anymore. You're just shifting those costs over to a vendor, and you're not really saving money. So when vendors come out and say you're going to save all this money in the cloud, I think it's disingenuous at best. Shifting gears, though, there is definite value to the cloud. I mean, there's advantages, there's efficiency gains, there's the lack of technical debt, the fact that you have constant R&D that's constantly improving and making the technology better that you didn't have before. So there's value there, but the cost is generally going to be higher than a lot of organizations think.
Yeah, absolutely. So Eric Kimberling is physically allergic to vendor bias, is what I'm hearing in that overall conversation.
Yes. It just coincided with this discussion.
Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely. So Wayne, you are a process efficiency expert. You do a lot in our defining an operating model, process mining, those types of different pieces. So what are your thoughts on the efficiency piece of processes in cloud technology?
I think it's becoming more and more important to actually have good process and understand your processes and get consistency of processes. And when you look at a SaaS or a cloud type option, that's what they're looking for, is that consistency. That vendors are preferring not to have customizations because to maintain that over the long term is much harder for them to do. And part of that ongoing versioning and updates is a preference on their behalf on why cloud is important for them. Not necessarily you as a client, they sell it as a benefit, but that's one of the things that is a benefit to them. And process and having standardized, consistent process is what that's based on. There's some organizations that want to stay as they always have, heavily customized, and that flies in the face of where a lot of software vendors are going, because if you look in the SAP world, they're sort of saying we want to end support on these heavily customized type options and try and push people into more of the cloud SaaS type options, because it's cheaper for them to maintain and keep updated with that. So yeah, that's what you sort of see. But the process piece is becoming more and more important, because if you don't actually attend to your processes, your effectiveness of a new deployment in a SaaS option becomes quite restricted. And that's a lot of people are learning that when it comes to deploying into new platforms, and that's where a lot of failures are starting to happen in that space.
Absolutely. And Greg, as you are often our North Star when it comes to strategic partnership and vendor communication, you keep us kind of level set. What do you see as far as vendors' overall perspective of pushing users into the cloud? Is that really for their benefit, or is it for the actual client's benefit as kind of our main stakeholder in that conversation?
Well, I'm glad you asked the question, because I take a little bit different perspective on this. I think that the vendors are pushing us in a direction that we want to go. The advent of the multi-tenant cloud environment. Remember the old on-premise upgrade cycles that happened every 2 to 5 years that cost $400,000 or $500,000, $1 million to go forward with. Think about continual optimization of those older applications. The new continual update of the multi-tenant cloud environment really sets you up for the next decade. So instead of implementing a software system that you're going to be using for the next 5 years, that you're going to have possibly another complete organization in 5 years with things changing. As change happens, the new cloud systems, the new multi-tenant cloud systems especially, can adapt to that change. And the integration is one of the questions that came across earlier, with APIs going back and forth between cloud environments. It is entirely flexible and interoperable to have your digital transformation include the entire system going forward with data unified on a single platform. And that's the promise of the new cloud technologies.
Absolutely. And I think that I'll just mention to our audience, this is my favorite part about working with the executives at Third Stage, is there are many different opinions, and that's the point. That's what makes us really valuable to our clients, is we go in with all of these different opportunities to do what's best for them in many different phases. So I just want to kind of point that out, is the years of experience that comes with this team, is the ability to speak to what's going to bring the most value to our clients. So Sam Graham has an interesting question here, and I'm actually going to go to you with this, Wayne. So when vendors say that their system is based on best practices, should we believe them? And the reason that I'm going to ask this question to Wayne is because he was one of our keynote speakers at our APAC regional digital stratosphere, which again you can find in our events section on our website, that replay. And we had a ton of dialogue from our APAC region specifically around vendor best practice. Some really, really interesting insight there from that community. So Wayne, I'm hoping that you could kind of bring that to life here in this question from Sam.
It's an interesting thought that a software vendor could actually give you best practice. Yes, probably on their terms, and for actually having a streamlined process of how you actually transact within the system. Best practice, consistent practice is yes, they probably could have that. But does it really relate to how an organization's best practice is? I don't believe that's the case, and I think that's where the myth that is sold often is that if we just put technology in, we'll have best practice. And unless we actually are doing best practice ourselves in those processes that don't actually always are integrated with the technology, then the best practice in technology won't be any better than just an average practice as such. So.
Absolutely. And Clifford gets the actual award for top buzzword of 2022 here with professional skepticism, which I now say in every conversation I have daily. So this kind of builds on that idea. And Clifford, a lot of your content around system integrators and their relationship with a digital transformation. So can you kind of speak to that, build on Wayne?
Yes, no, I fully agree with Wayne, and one also has to ask the question, what constitutes best practice in terms of, because it really does come down to where you're at as an organization and in which areas you're wanting to improve and mature. Certainly, one cannot do it across all business domains. I think one has to be selective, and sometimes that best practice may well come from inside the organization, as to how can we improve. It may well come from some type of reference model with industry reference model. So I think clients need to have the choice to interrogate what the vendor's bringing along in terms of their best practices, what is industry best practices, and what are their own people saying, where are the areas that we need to close the gap, where we need to improve, and more often than not, a combination of those three, in my view.
Absolutely. And Eric, I see you nodding, ready to enter this conversation. So what are your thoughts on those best practices? And before your answer, I'll just remind the audience that our 2023 report, which we're talking about here, has our best practices that we've pulled out, not only from vendors, but also from our own proven client experience. So with that, Eric, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think Clifford said it really well. I totally agree with everything he just said and what the group has said so far about best practices. I think, the key to what Clifford just said is that that resonated with me is really just selectively, deliberately determining where you're going to leverage quote unquote vendor best practices. And I use quotes because who's to define what a best practice is, really? I mean, and B, is that best practice really suitable for you as an organization? So there's going to be certain parts of your organization that are certainly going to benefit from those software best practices, but there's also going to be parts of your organization where those best practices aren't relevant, or they're not good enough, or it just doesn't fit your goals and objectives. In those cases, you may not want to use those best practices. You may want to Clifford's point, develop your own best practices or leverage your own internal best practices. And maybe, and God forbid, I know everyone hates to hear this, but maybe you need to customize the software, change the software to fit your business. and that competitive advantage. And so I think you have to sort of separate your business processes and capabilities into two buckets. One bucket is these are sort of our more commodity-based business processes that, yes, we want to leverage whatever capabilities the software can bring to us. And then there's a bucket over here that's more the competitive differentiators, the things that our customers interact with, the way the customers interact with us, or the things that allow us to go to market faster and produce products faster, whatever the case may be. Those areas are where you're really going to want to dial in on your own internal best practices, define what those business processes should look like, then figure out how the technology fits in within that, rather than just leveraging software best practices.
Absolutely. And that customization piece, Greg, I'm going to bring up this comment because it kind of goes off of your last talk track. But I want to specifically talk about the best practice of the post go live adoption. You talk a lot about how you help our clients make sure that they are realizing the overall ROI and maximizing business value by those post go live. So this comment, many of the multi-tenant cloud applications focus on user experience in addition to effectiveness and efficiency. The third E of experience also helps drive the post go live adoption. So when we're talking about best practices, how do you ensure that when kind of the vendor talks about best practices, that's actually realized by the client?
Well, actually, I think that goes back to the organization being on board with the entire journey that you're going forward with. So if you don't have the organization, the executive level on down, involved in the implementation of the new technology, of the new system, they're not going to have the knowledge of the system, the use, their own applied best practices internally as an organization, and they're going to start reverting to old practices and not really adopt the new system in the way that it's intended. So it's very important that you have the entire organization moving forward under one banner, right? And that is really the secret, the key to user adoption at the end of the journey, and satisfaction with the system that you've implemented all the way along.
Absolutely. And I think that leads us to kind of our final thought here when it comes to the digital transformation report and those keys to success. So I want to go around and kind of finish this out, since we're up against the top of the hour, about what is the key takeaway in your opinion from this report, and what would be the recommendation for our audience here if you had to pick one part of the report to focus on. And Wayne, let's start with you.
I think the report actually gets people to think. So there's a number of different steps there, and it sort of articulates those out. And so the areas in my mind are those areas where you actually start to prepare and think about what you're doing, understanding what strategy is, and those what it means for engagement and how all of that works. And I think that's the key thing I see from the report. It helps people understand there's more to it than just going out and buying a software and implementing. And I think that's where the report really adds value.
Absolutely, that perspective is so important. What about you, Clifford? What are some of the key takeaways that you take from this kind of overarching report on transformations in 2023?
Yeah, I would encourage our participants and listeners on the call to focus on the failures, because they seem to be perennial. We seem to have from one report to the next, and I think, Kyle, if we've done a bit of an exercise and went back to this report, or similar ones from 5-10 years ago, we're probably going to find a lot of similarity, and organizations for some other reason just seemingly fail to learn that and apply those lessons. So really understand those failures and make sure that you're continuously interrogating and reflecting. You're going down those rabbit holes and you're falling into those traps, because we seem to be unable to shake them and learn from them. And it's always sad to see when organizations make those same mistakes over and again, ending in failure. So really understand the reasons for failures and ensure that that's not happening to you as you step through this journey.
Absolutely. And both Wayne and Eric are expert witnesses when it comes to working on our failure cases when they do get to that point. we do have that content in the 2023 report that talks about how to kind of avoid that, because we never obviously want you to get there. But Greg, some final thoughts on the best part of this report?
I'm going to tag on to Clifford a little bit. I love the failure discussion, but not because of the failures. It's really because people are looking for an idea about what it's going to cost me. What is the organization going to experience? We've got a whole section in the report that talks about what you can expect in terms of cost, in terms of organizational change, the disruption to the organization, and avoiding the pitfalls. And at the risk of repeating what Clifford, Wayne, and Eric are all saying, that is a very important part of the report in terms of learning.
Absolutely. And Eric, as the main thought leader behind this report, what specifically about the 2023 report are you excited to share with our community here?
Well, in addition to what Clifford and Greg said about the, just sort of the lessons learned and the best practices behind implementation, and Wayne mentioned some of that as well. I think the other value, or the other big thing that I like about the report, is just that it shows organizations, or it's meant to show organizations, you have a lot of different choices and options and directions and paths you can go down with your digital transformation. We've talked about a lot of those decisions, cloud versus on-premise, and single ERP versus best of breed, all that stuff. We do a lot of, in that report, in addition to some of the implementation best practices, we also talk about some of the software comparisons, our independent and agnostic reviews, if you will, of these different options and types of systems and vendors in the marketplace. And I think what it does is it really showcases and highlights the fact that organizations have a lot of different options. There's no one right answer for any given organization, and you need to really have a clearly defined digital strategy and roadmap to leverage selectively the best technology or technologies and corresponding business improvements that are going to go along with that. That, combined with the readiness and the preparation that Greg talked a lot about, those two things combined, I think, are really going to set organizations up for success. And those are some of the lessons we wanted to impart in this report.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps us up for this amazing panel. I hope everyone learned something today. I highly recommend connecting with these four thought leaders on LinkedIn. Their names are right here. Again, we had Eric Kimberling, Clifford Martin, Wayne Holtham, and Greg Benton here with us today. Such an amazing panel. We're talking about the 2023 Digital Transformation Report, available on thirdstage-consulting.com. in our guides and reports, also in wherever you're getting this, either podcast or live stream. It's in the description as well. You can go ahead and download it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email us directly to talk about what your thoughts are, or to share some feedback, because we always obviously love to hear from our audience. Looks like Sam's taken the report with him on holiday, so you can take some light reading if you want to be able to do that. But we so appreciate our guests and audience joining us today, and all of the amazing user and thought leader feedback. Just a reminder, we do have live streams with Eric every Tuesday morning, and then with me on Thursdays and Fridays. Next week, we'll be talking about system architecture with one of our top consultants here, Mitch Otteson. So please feel free to join us there by subscribing to our channel. So thank you again all for joining us, and have a great weekend or start to your Friday morning here in the United States.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.